So PlayStation just dropped 40 minutes of brand new 007 First Light gameplay. Today, let's walk through that gameplay. Let's break down everything that we see and everything that we expect to see from IO Interactive's newest game, 007 First Light. Again, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to see more content like this. Now let's jump into the gameplay. So off the bat, I want to say this right here, right now. This is some of the most raw and uncut gameplay I've seen ever being dropped from a big developer like this. IO Interactive are the developers behind the very famous Hitman series, and they just dropped straight up 40 minutes of gameplay without any sort of real cuts and showing all the good that the game has to offer, as well as some of the bad that we'll go into. But for real, credit where credit is due. This is extremely impressive, and it just shows how confident they are within the actual gameplay itself, that they're just willing to drop 30 to 40 minutes of straight up gameplay, no commentary, no cutting, nothing to make it look better than it actually is. So yeah, that's super awesome to see, but now let's jump into the gameplay. So off the bat, we see that the young James Bond is driving through this pretty beautiful countryside. And we know right now that this game is not going to be open world. Instead, it's going to be like those big sandbox missions like IO Interactive's other games with Hitman. So we know that while this driving is in the game and it looks beautiful for what it is, this is not an open world. And to be honest, I didn't really expect that because of the fact that, you know, IO Interactive's bread and butter is these sandbox missions. And also James Bond is known from traveling from place to place to place, kind of like Indiana Jones or something like that, where they're just traveling to different countries. So setting it all in one persistent world would be difficult because a lot of that variation that James Bond is known for would just be gone. But as much as we like what we see, there's also a glaring issue that I noticed right away, and that's that the frame rate is incredibly choppy. I mean, right now, this YouTube video was dropped at 4K 60 FPS, but you can clearly notice that the frame rate is dropping well below 60 FPS, and there's not even that much going on. They're just driving through the countryside. So this is actually a major issue because it could absolutely indicate certain performance problems when the game drops. Now, I will say that this game still has another 6 or so months before it drops. I think it has a March 2026 release date. So like there's plenty of time for these kinks to get ironed out. But right now in this gameplay segment specifically, the frame rate is incredibly bad and it's very, very distracting at times. But another thing that you'll notice while this driving sequence is going on is that there's just no HUD. It's completely clean, the screen is completely clean, and you're just relying on just the directional cues of the road itself while they're driving. What this means is that this game is going for a more immersive experience. Without a mini-map, without a compass, without any sort of real objective markers or anything like that, what IO Interactive is signaling is that this game requires you to figure things out on your own and to go through each sandbox on your own, depending on how you think it's best completed. And that's a good thing to see because that is, again, IO Interactive's bread and butter. You hear this trend come up a lot throughout this video, but at the end of the day, this James Bond game is very much just a Hitman game with some extra flashy set pieces and a little bit of less of that like goofiness that Hitman is known for, but it's still those large sandbox open experiences, and that keeps getting showcased throughout this gameplay segment. So after the driving sequence, we see James Bond park his car, and we see the mission actually ensue when we're supposed to infiltrate the hotel. And right away, we can see some major things that are present in the Hitman games that are also being carried over to the James Bond game. The first thing is that there are, again, no objective markers. You're just told to infiltrate the hotel however you see fit. And with this comes multiple stages to infiltrate. It's not as simple as running around the building until you find like an open window that you can sneak through. You can see in this gameplay right here that there are multiple steps to this. he first goes up to the guy to ask to be let in, and they say that you need a key card. One thing that popped up were some dialogue options. So that just shows that there are multiple ways to talk to this guy, and there are potential ways to talk yourself through scenarios without having to resort to any sort of stealth or violence, which is super cool to see, because as far as I know, that's not in the Hitman games. I haven't played the Hitman games that much, but I don't think there's those like dialogue options where you can kind of talk yourself through. So that's something that they're adding into the James Bond franchise, which looks pretty interesting and unique in the way that you can just talk yourself through certain scenarios. But beyond that, after that fails, James Bond and the player go like hide in a bush, steal something, like start a sprinkler to distract a guard, and then move their way in through a window. So it was a multi-step process, and it wasn't just as simple as, okay, here's an open window, let me just climb through it and no one's gonna give a shit because that's how this game is designed. This is absolutely taking into effect some of those things about the Hitman franchise, where like each NPC and what's happening and how they react is super important to how you can play through a mission. Another thing that I noticed was that there was almost like a detective mode from Batman, where you can kind of like scan the technology and see like different things that you can do. This is super interesting and super cool because of the fact that like James Bond is known for having high-tech things. So having this sort of like detective mode is super cool to see, and is actually fits in line with what you would expect from a James Bond game. A couple of other things that we saw were like hiding in bushes, kind of similar to Assassin's Creed in that gameplay segment. We also saw some pretty good parkour. Again, similar to like an Assassin's Creed or like the Hitman games, where there's just some light parkour to get from like place to place depending on what you want to do. And we also saw some technology that James Bond is going to be using. One of the ones that we saw were like a sleep dart that like ejects from his watch. Again, super cool, super technologically advanced is what we would expect with like a James Bond game. We would want James Bond to have like advanced technology to use because of the fact that that's like kind of what he's built on. He's kind of like a super spy. So again, super cool stuff there. I'm glad that they're fitting with the James Bond narrative. But yeah, without a doubt, even after we infiltrate the hotel, the mission structure looks very similar to Hitman games, where you're always just given an objective and expected to make your own path. In the gameplay segment, it's pretty obvious that they show like there are multiple NPCs you can talk to and multiple ways you can complete this objective, and that the one that they're showing is not the only way you can go about doing things. So again, great to see, but very similar to Hitman games. It almost just kind of feels like a Hitman game with like a fresh coat of paint, which like if you love the Hitman games, obviously that's great to see and that's what you want to see. But if you're someone like me who hasn't really been into Hitman games before, and like as much as you enjoy that like sandbox replayability, you also like traditional like linear games as well, where you're kind of just like going through objective after objective, kind of like an Uncharted game, you may have a little bit of problems here just because you kind of have to learn something new. You have to make your own path out of things, and you will probably fail and mess up multiple times. But beyond that, it still looks like a well-polished version of that sandbox environment, which again is what IO Interactive is known for. So again, super minor gripe and something that like not a lot of players are going to care about, but I can see that like sandbox infiltration structure getting a little old as the game goes on, because this is again a James Bond game and less of like a Hitman game where you're just given a big sandbox to go into. So after that, there was a massive car chase sequence where we saw James Bond like go through this countryside chasing a car, and again, it looks very good. It looks very good. I will say that I think the car chase dragged on a little too long, but one thing that I think that this highlighted was the fact that these worlds and these sandboxes that they're building for each of these missions are freaking massive. Like, James Bond was driving for a long time in that sequence, and he was driving in like a straight line away from the main sandbox like objective point. And that's pretty cool to see that how big some of these sandbox levels are going to be. But beyond that, we saw a lot of realistic destruction, especially with the car driving through things, like jumping off ramps, things like that. A lot of it looked really cool. A lot of it looked really interesting. But again, just kind of basic car chase stuff. Nothing too surprising or too like crazy interesting here. But it looked like it was done well, which was good to see. Now, after this came, in my opinion, the coolest part of the whole showcase, and that was the third-person combat. Without a doubt, like, James Bond is obviously known for getting into some combat scenarios when he gets that license to kill, and the third-person shooting looked phenomenal. It was so punchy, it was so weighty, like each bullet felt like it had a crazy impact. They showed some hand-to-hand combat as well, where you could, like, James Bond could like throw people off buildings and off planes and things like that. And without a doubt in my mind, like, yes, this game is probably going to be like primarily like stealth, like thriller focused, because that is what James Bond is all about. It's like that social stealth, that like finding and infiltrating certain aspects. But when all hell does break loose and you're fighting and you're shooting guns and all this, it looked really good. Like, it looked really good. And I'm super excited to play through some of the more combat heavy sections of this game. But without a doubt, you could also tell that this is where the game was struggling the most. Massive FPS drops while big explosions were going on. I mean, the specular lighting and the particles like of the explosions all looked great. But like, holy shit, I'm pretty sure the FPS got below 30 at some points. This game was chugging at some points. And like, at the end of the day, yes, I'm glad that they showed that like this is obviously a very work in progress build. There's still 6 or so months left to go to like iron out what they want to iron out. But like, goddamn, that was bad. Like, if that is the best you can put out, because at the end of the day, they do also want to put out like the best version of it. They don't want the game to look bad by any means. If that is the best you can put out right now, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. That was brutal at times, like genuinely brutal at times. And so like, I'm going to be playing this on PC. Luckily, I have a very nice PC to like play through, but like, if you can't brute force your way to performance, which is like maybe like the 1% of people can, and if you're on a console, no less, you're going to struggle with this game if this is what the performance is like, and that's going to massively hinder people's perception of the game. So IO Interactive, I really hope you fix the performance issues in these next 6 months, because goddamn was it bad. But also during this like plane segment, one of the coolest things was like controlling the plane while the combat was going on. Like, James Bond had the opportunity to like tilt the plane different directions, and that would like, all the physics of like the boxes and the people would like go that direction, and you could kind of like get your way to the like objective or whatever it was. And that was super cool to see. And what that shows me is that there are going to be these unique systems and features like built out for each sandbox. Like, I highly doubt this like plane tilt feature comes up again after this mission or before this mission. However, this signifies that there are going to be more systems like this that are like proprietarily built for certain missions in certain sandbox environments, which is super cool to see. And like, it gives that like more big budget action thriller feeling when there's these big set pieces that you can like control, and they're all varied and not just the same thing over and over again. But yeah, after that like main gameplay segment concluded, they also had some like other tidbits and stuff. And the one that I really want to point out was the fact that like they mentioned that there are multiple ways you can take out different scenarios, which obviously is a given, but the fact that you can also use dialogue as a way to get out of a certain scenario. They showed a specific example where you could like stealth your way through enemies, or you could walk in and like pretend to be like lost, and they would help you out, and you could like kind of like work your way through that way. So I'm curious to see like how good that like talking your way out is going to be, because if it's like an OP system, like you could spam it and then like never really have to engage with any of the other systems. But I doubt that'll be the case. I'm sure there are going to be times where you have to stealth your way through, or you have to like brute force your way through. So again, interested to see, but it's good to see that there are different ways and different scenarios, not just stealth and combat to get through scenarios. You can use your words, you can use other ways to work your way through these scenarios. And that, again, is what IO Interactive is known for. But yeah, pretty short video. That was kind of just my breakdown of what I saw in the 007 First Light gameplay. Overall, I came away pretty positive from it. I saw a lot of things that I liked, but I can't deny that this does just look like a Hitman game with a few extra features and a new coat of paint. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. That's what IO Interactive is known for, and those are the developers making the game, so that's the type of game you're going to get. But does that have the potential to be slightly generic? Also, yes. If the story isn't that good, which like there's no reason to believe that it's not going to be good, but say maybe it's lackluster or just okay, like you're going to rely heavily on the gameplay to get yourself through these scenarios. And as of now, the gameplay doesn't look that much more improved or that much different than a Hitman game. This is going to be a game that I will heavily base my opinion and judgment on based on the story, because I know that the gameplay is going to be there. I know that the gameplay is going to be solid because it's like a Hitman game. I'm just curious on if they can match that quality with the story, because Hitman games aren't really known for their stories. They're known to just drop you in. This is your scenario. This is who you have to kill. This is how you got to do it. Go figure it out. Like, this is like a James Bond game where there are certain implications and fans expect certain things from the story. They expect a really cool villain. They expect certain, set pieces and things like that that really bring out what James Bond is all about. They expect some like spy stuff and like infiltration and high tech and like, working with your friends at MI6, things like that that are expected from a James Bond game, or just like the James Bond franchise in general that IO Interactive has to hit on. But yeah, other than that, again, super excited for this game. Let me know down below what you think about this game. This game's dropping March 27th, 2026. So we still got a little while for this game to get polished. I have no doubt that I'm sure that they're going to work out a lot of these performance kinks and stuff. But again, it was a little still rough to see. But yeah, super excited for this one. Let me know down below what you think about 007 First Light. Are you excited for it? Are you looking forward to it? Did it just look kind of generic to you and just like any other Hitman game? Let me know. I want to hear what y'all got to say down below. But yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to see more content like this. But yeah, guys, it's been CGG. I'm out.